Anderson?
Admiral?
You look good, Shepard. Maybe a little soft around the edges. How you holding up since being relieved from duty?
It's not so bad once you get used to the hot food and soft beds.
We'll get it sorted out.
What's going on? Why is everyone in such a hurry?
Admiral Hackett's mobilizing the fleets. I'm guessing word's made it to Alliance Command. Something big's headed our way.
Hi there, my name is Dal Fridge, and this is my review for Mass Effect 3. After stopping Saren and Sovereign in Mass Effect and thwarting Harbinger's plans in Mass Effect 2 twice, we last left Commander Shepard being told she'd have to face trial for the events at the end of Arrival, and were left with a shot of the Reapers moving ever closer to the Milky Way from their resting place in dark space. Mass Effect 3 opens with Shepard being back on Earth preparing to face the aforementioned trial. Since the end of the Arrival DLC, the Systems Alliance are taking the Reaper invasion a little bit more seriously and call Shepard up to discuss defences. Unfortunately, they're a little too late to take the Reaper threat seriously when the invasion of Earth begins during this meeting. You fight your way back to Normandy with Admiral Anderson. Anderson stays behind on Earth to start the resistance movement, while you're tasked with going out into space to bring together all the races of the Milky Way to fight the Reapers off once and for all. Unsurprisingly, this is a much harder job than it should be. Many of the races still have a burning hatred towards each other, and depending on the choices you've made in the previous games, different races are more or less inclined to help humanity take Earth back. How much of an effect your choices up to this point have had in the story depends a little bit on your point of view. Nearly every squad mate and key character from the series will return, providing they survived your previous games of course, and nearly all of your previous decisions are at least referenced at varying levels of importance. For example, if he survived the events of Mass Effect, Captain Kirahi will be present during a mission on a Solarian STG base and offer his support in the upcoming battle. Of course, if you didn't choose to support him in Mass Effect, which caused his death, you won't see him here. Other characters have more importance, such as during the first part of the story based around the Krogans, you either have Urdnot Rex if he survived Mass Effect, or if he died you have his brood brother Urdnot Reeve. Reeve trusts you less, however in essence the story plays out much the same. As I said previously, how big a change this is depends on your point of view. For those of us invested in the franchise and the characters, this is quite a large change, as it's the difference between your squad mate you've known for 2 games returning, or seeing some random Krogan. However, if you don't care about the characters as much, this isn't that much of a change. The story can still play out much the same, it just might be a little bit harder to get the best outcomes. This isn't all about past choices however, as there are still plenty to go. On your quest to unite the galaxy you'll have to make a number of difficult choices, some of which might not be as desirable as you'd hope. There are still a few things just a little bit off with the choice system however. On one planet you have to choose between freeing one large asset or supporting a small squad of Krogan. I'm trying to keep this spoiler free here. If you choose the large asset, the small Krogan squad are wiped out within a second, and their leader bursts through a wall to escort you out instantly, too quickly for the squad to have actually been overrun as was said. This just came across as a bit lazy and as if they couldn't be bothered to deal with the actual choice, rather than just give you the outcomes instantly.
The Krogan is in no position to make demands.
The Krogan has a name. Urdnot Rex. And I'm not just some junkyard Varen you unleash whenever you're in trouble. I've got my own problems. Reaper scouts have arrived on Tuchanka. So why should I care if a few Turians go extinct?
Trying to draw out negotiations will get you nowhere, Rex. I have no time for it. Just tell us what you want.
As was the case with Mass Effect 2, a number of the key mechanics have been updated or overhauled in order to improve the gameplay even more. You can import your character from Mass Effect 2, which will import all of your choices as well as your class and appearance. Again, as with Mass Effect 2 you are given the choice to alter your appearance and change your class if you wish to. Important characters also start the game at the same level they finished Mass Effect 2 at, which is a maximum of 30. You'll still have levelling up to do and skills to choose however, as the maximum level in Mass Effect 3 is now 60. You do have more choice over skills now as well. Each skill has 6 ranks in total, the first 3 of which are always relatively simple. Ranks 4, 5 and 6 however are always a choice between 2 bonuses. For example, you could choose between a 25% damage increase or 25% skill recharge speed. These choices often provide secondary effects and synergies with other skills as well. The biggest change to the class system is the way in which weapons are managed. Rather than the type of weapons you can carry being defined by your class, now any class can use any weapon. The catch is that weapons now have a weight, and the heavier they are, the slower your powers recharge. This means you have to choose between firepower and your class powers. For instance, as an adept you can carry a submachine gun and a pistol for low firepower but a fast power recharge, so more warps and singularities, or you could choose an assault rifle and play similar to a soldier but with the occasional biotic power thrown in. This adds an extra level of customization without making it so you can be completely overpowered and breeze through the game. This new system also sees the removal of heavy weapons from your loadout, rather you just occasionally find them on the floor, and if you pull out a normal weapon you'll then drop it. The new weapon system also sees the return of weapon mods and an increase in the number of weapons you can choose between. Rather than just being one or two upgrades for each weapon, there are now multiple different versions of each weapon again, each with distinct attributes and advantages and disadvantages. Alongside these weapon mechanic improvements, there's also been further refinement of the combat system in general. You can now roll from cover to cover in more ways, and stay in cover around corners. Combat generally feels very similar to how it was in Mass Effect 2, but smoother overall. This smoothness is further aided if you have Connect, as you're able to shout various commands in battle. This is mainly used for changing weapons and using powers for both yourself and your squad mates, and in general it works very well. There is a slight delay between you shouting and the response on screen, but it isn't bad at all, and once you get used to the timing it's absolutely fine. You can also use the Connect features to talk out conversation choices and open doors and containers. These are slightly more gimmicky use to the Connect functionality, but they are only optional, and you can still use control if you wish to. While it is fairly gimmicky talking aloud the speech options, it does help to immerse you in the gameplay even further. Opening doors and chests on the other hand I felt was fairly pointless with Connect and didn't add much to the experience. This functionality isn't entirely perfect however. Sometimes it will just misunderstand you and you do have to actually shout to make it respond. Just talking normally would never pick up for me. I also found that I had to use headphones as the TV volume would interfere with it. This isn't much of an issue for me as I nearly always use headphones anyway, but it will affect the majority of people who just use the TV speakers. These Connect features don't quite replace buttons, but it is a good way to play and an interesting use of the technology. I can't help but feel once Connect has been refined a little further this will be a feature we see more and more of. There's also a welcome change to the planet scanning system. Rather than having to scan every planet multiple times, you now just shoot a pulse out from the Normandy which will highlight anything of interest. This will either be an object in space you just interact with, or if it is on a planet you'll go to the same old scanning interface as if it's an anomaly. However there is only one and then you move on to the next cluster. Every time you use this pulse it alerts the Reapers a little to your presence, and if it gets too high they will chase you out the system. You can still go into the system and quickly snipe resources after this, but they will chase you in that system until you complete a mission.
I want that gunship prepped and in the air! Plug that hole! We're on it! Someone get me a location on our snipers!
Yes, ma'am!
Commander, I'm Lieutenant Curran. We've been told to expect you. My orders are to hold this grid at all costs. Shore up the barrier! But our perimeter's collapsing, and I'm getting my people out of here.
This is important. We need your help.
One thing that does feel like a bit of a step backwards is in the mission hubs. In Mass Effect, one big complaint was about the amount of time you spent on the Citadel, something which was largely remedied in Mass Effect 2. However this time we seem to spend an inordinate amount of time there again. Most of the side missions you pick up are from the Citadel, and at least twice in the game you get a dozen or so side quests just from walking around, all of which are handed back into the same place. What's especially odd about this is that the Citadel seems to be the only hub in Mass Effect 3. In the first game you had the Citadel, Novaria and Feros, in the second game you had Omega, Ilium and Tuchanka, in 3 it's just the Citadel. Not all side quests are tied to Citadel though, there are many fully fleshed out optional quests as well as several N7 missions. This time around the N7 missions are set in the multiplayer maps and usually revolve around fighting off a few waves of Cerberus troops while trying to reach an objective. Quite a lot of these quests are time limited in a similar way to the end of Mass Effect 2. If for example you don't do Grissom Academy before a certain point in the story, the events unfold very differently. My only real complaint about the side quests this time around is that they aren't tracked very well. This might sound petty, but the journal rarely updates mid-quest, which means if you lose where you are you have to resort to looking the quest up, something I've never had to do so much in previous Mass Effect titles. With that step back though, there are several more improvements. The variety in enemies has been stepped up further in that you now fight Cerberus troops of varying types, many different Reaper enemies, several new Geth enemies, as well as several other forces which I won't spoil. You can also track your chances in the final fight easier than before. In the previous instalment this was largely based around squad loyalty through side quests. In Mass Effect 3 it's tied into the Galaxy at War system. There are two sides to this. War assets are gained throughout the story for all missions and many optional actions. How many assets you have is what affects your chances in the final battle. However, you also have Galactic Readiness, which is entirely optional. This is tied into the multiplayer as well as a couple of iOS games, and will mean you can go into the final battle with less assets. It's a little complicated to explain, but it is possible to achieve the perfect ending without doing the multiplayer at all. But if you do play multiplayer, you'll achieve this quicker, and you can do less of the single player if you wish to.
Commander, come to check on your new recruit. Just wanted to see how you were doing.
Still trying to get my bearings. When I was working on the Normandy's upgrades, I left at the end of the day. I didn't even have a toothbrush or a change of clothing until I made some emergency purchases on the Citadel.
Next time you need something, just ask. You're not alone here.
Oh, it's no trouble, Commander. I'm sure you have larger concerns.
We can put in a requisition order.
My toothbrush is a Cision Pro Mark IV. It uses tiny Mass Effect fields to break up plaque and massage the gums. It costs 6,000 credits.
Okay, yeah. You're on your own with that.
The visuals are much what you'd expect for a Mass Effect game. They're very good on the whole, however you do have that standard Mass Effect choppy frame rate. I also came across quite a few visual bugs, such as characters disappearing mid-conversation. There did seem to be quite an issue with scenes locking up for long periods of time, or freezing entirely needing a restart as well. None of this ruined the game, but it's noticeable and tended to break the immersion. On the subject of breaking immersion, the biggest culprit of this is switching discs. Usually I have no issue with games being on multiple discs, as it only requires you to get off your ass and switch discs every so often. However, for the first part of this game, it felt as though I was switching back and forth between discs between each side mission, which became quite frustrating. The final thing that needs mentioning about the single player campaign is the controversy surrounding the ending. I won't go into it in detail here or spoil anything, but I do want to say that while I have some issues with it, I do like the idea behind it. I've provided a link in the description for this review to a short article I wrote about it, which will contain spoilers. Mass Effect 3 was a game I very much enjoyed like both of its predecessors, and it remains one of my favourite video game series of all time. While I do have some issues with the ending, I'm sure these will be sorted out in the inevitable DLC, and even if they aren't, I do hope BioWare continue to make stories in this universe. For those interested in the multiplayer aspect of Mass Effect 3, I'll be reviewing that separately, as this video has already gone on long enough.